Hello, Coralai. In this short screencast, I'm going to give you feedback to your summary from last week. Okay, so let's start. First sentence, title of the video, name of the speaker, good reporting verb argues that the way we currently think, talk, and act about racial biases is not sufficient. Sure. I would say you're repeating the wording of the speaker maybe too much. So you could definitely rephrase this in your own word, using your own phrasing. Remember, part of the task is to use your own words so that you avoid plagiarism. So, but the point here is very clear and focused. So it's the way we currently think, talk, and act is not sufficient. So, and also, because this is the main idea of the whole video, part of it has to do with making recommendations. So you can add that to the main idea. Remember, in the second half of the video, he was talking about recommendations, things we can do, right, to solve the problem of biases. So you could add that idea. And also, the first sentence should be argumentative, but also concise. So make sure that you reduce the word count a little bit while adding the idea of recommendations. Something like, he argues that or claims that the way we currently think, well, actually that would be repeating his words again. So you could just say that we're prone to biases, and but there are things we can do, steps we can take in order to fix the problem, right? Something like that. He defines, usually we use the present, right, for reporting verbs. So use the present tense. He defines the three characteristics of biases. Sure. By which biases can be identified. Good. The first one is that implicit biases operate at the subconscious level, and consequently, the second is that they run contrary to our conscious beliefs. Okay, fine. We've decided to combine the first two in one sentence. That's fine. The last one is the rapid automatic mental associations that we cannot control, which we cannot control, and you do not need a comma here. Which is better to use in this case, the relative pronoun. After this, Hockett explained, again you want to use the present, why we should focus on implicit biases. Now here you could mention he gives recommendations. He gives several recommendations, blah 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 and blah, right? According to him, this approach will expand the diagnosis. Again, you're repeating the wording a little bit too closely. Will expand the diagnosis of the problem and give the whole picture of the situation. So again, you can rephrase with your own words. You can say something like, if we're able to diagnose the problem, we're more aware of it, and then we're in a better position to fix the problem, to solve the issue, right? So you rephrase using your own words a little bit, okay, for the first part of the sentence. And the second, and give the whole picture of the situation, it's a little bit vague here. It's not very precise language. So I'm not sure that you even need this. There's no need for this vague phrasing. So yeah, say something like, we need to be able to diagnose the problem, which will put us in a better position to fix it, to solve the problem, or something like that. But again, try to use your own words instead of repeating the phrasing of the speaker. You can repeat obviously the key terms, implicit biases, some of the key terminology. Absolutely, you need to repeat that. You cannot rephrase that. You cannot paraphrase terminology. But the rest of it should be really your own words. Okay? Also, it is predictive and preventive. Again, if you've mentioned recommendations here, I would suggest add something right here. He offers 3 recommendations. Just mention that. I think that would be a good idea, because then that will set you up very nicely for the rest of the summary. One of the things, or one of the steps we can take, so you can use these cohesive devices. The first step, or one of the steps we can take, is to be aware of the situation of the problem, right? To be able to diagnose the problem, like that. Also, additionally, that's a good cohesive device. Now here, it is predictive and preventive. What is predictive and preventive? Here the reference is not very clear. You can just again put that as a step that we can take. Also, or additionally, we can, right? So the reference is not very clear here. Instead, you could make it, we need to be proactive in predicting our own biases, right? And preventing them, something like that. Basically, if you, I don't know how many words this is, but you have up to 200 words, you could even expand a little bit here, right? He was saying, instead of reacting to the situation, you need to predict. I will be in a certain situation. What kind of bias will I have in that situation? So we need to be able to predict that, right? That is, we can easily, so here I would expand a little bit on what do you mean by predictive and preventive. We need to be proactive in making sure that when we find ourselves in a certain situation, we need to have analyzed our biases in advance so that we know how to react. Something like that. That will explain predictive and preventive. Because right now, imagine somebody has not seen this video, and if they just read those 2 adjectives, what do they mean, right? So you need to expand a little bit. And here you say that is, we can easily identify with some tests and try to reduce. Okay, reduce what? Reduce is a transitive verb, and again it's a word that he uses. You don't have to repeat that word necessarily. Transitive meaning it cannot stand on its own. Transitive verb. In other words, we need to reduce what? Our biases, right? But you don't have to necessarily use that phrasing. Now, he does mention tests, association tests, but imagine somebody has not seen the video. What would that mean to them? That is, we can easily identify it with some tests. See, it sounds kind of vague. He does mention the Harvard tests, but I would say this is an example. And so you're better off not even mentioning that, because remember, we stay away from examples. So just don't even mention it. Now, the important thing though is, what is it an example of? What is it trying to say with that? Why does he mention these tests? Well, he mentions it as an example of how we need to be prepared, right? Of the predictive and preventive approach. We need to take a proactive approach by analyzing our own biases so that we can react accordingly when we get into those situations, right? Something like that. And then you don't need to mention these specific tests, which would not make sense to anybody who hasn't seen the video, right? And here again, you're repeating the wording. Again, the emergency room approach would not mean very much to somebody who has not seen the video, although we could guess what it means, right? So again, you can rephrase using your own wording for this whole point. But it's a good idea though that you did include that, because that is a very important supporting idea. That's the second thing we can do. And here you could start with a cohesive device. Second, or another step we can take, or another thing, another solution or something that we can do is blah blah blah. In addition, and here is that would be the last step. This would reduce the shaming of people. I'm not very sure, because others can see their own biases. Here it's a little bit unclear. He does mention open discussion. We need to be ready to talk about our biases openly without shame, right? Something like that. This would reduce the shaming of people because others can see their own biases. I'm not very sure what this is actually saying here. So it's a little bit unclear. Again, use your own words to summarize that third point, that third recommendation, which was we need to be ready to discuss our own biases openly without feeling guilty, without any feelings of shame, because by openly discussing our biases, that's the way that we can start solving the problem, right? And then your last sentence, it is important to study and work with implicit biases in order to stop all kinds of, that's a very good, I think that's a very good last sentence, because it does offer this recommendation at the end. So good last sentence. The first sentence is also okay, where you talk about the main idea, but again, add the recommendation part. And then your paragraph is generally well structured. You use cohesive devices, the first one, after this also, so that's very good. Just make sure you use more of your own phrasing. Okay, overall this is a good paragraph, quite decent. So I hope you find this feedback helpful. Good luck.